Tonight, we're invited to Camille Cole's beach party. It's the tits, it's the jam. Everyone's gonna be there. College kids, rich kids, athletes, horse girls, skaters. It's teenage high society.
Over on the Metacritic, it has an 85 on the critic side. However, on the user side, it only has a 6.2. So obviously this game is speaking to what I would call professional critics, but not to the average user. And I feel like we are in this middle era right now of games journalism versus user input as journalism. Some people are gonna look at review scores, look at reviews, and they're gonna trust an influencer or, you know, somebody like, say, Luke Stevens, for example. They're gonna trust that person because they give honest takes. It's one of the reasons why I don't really typically review games, but sometimes I talk about them. And I feel like that is an important distinction to make. I've always been a really big fan of Annapurna Interactive. Artful Escape, one of my favorite games. Stray, a very cozy game that I ended up playing on PS5 one morning when I was really, really sick. Very chill, narrative-based adventure. And when we got word that they were doing this sort of Spider-Verse-esque coming-of-age story, very much in line with something like the Life is Strange series or other things similar to that, I was excited to play it. I didn't think it was going to be a 60-hour title. I didn't think it was going to be a $70 game. And it came out. And this 4-hour supposedly indie narrative game has broken people's brains. And it has sort of exposed, or, you know, maybe reminded us of the disconnect between critic views and audience views, the sort of growing mistrust against traditional games journalism. This game probably should have just came and went, but it didn't. It committed the worst crime of all. It got a 10, but not specifically just any 10. It got a rare IGN 10. And a lot of other game critics jumped in this bandwagon.
Musical delight from start to finish, Mixtape sets a new standard for coming-of-age stories in video games, and does so with a masterful sense of style.
Single most relatable thing I have ever experienced. Multiple times playing this game, I'm like, is this my favorite thing ever?
So much of what you said, Tim. Like, this is a 10 out of 10. You know, this is a masterpiece. This is a game that I don't know, and I know this is hyperbolic to a stretch here. I don't know if there's ever been a game I've played that I'm like, I could recommend this to anybody.
At the right moment, it may just send a happy shiver down your spine, which is how I spent much of my time with Mixtape and why I'll never forget it.
It puts out a lot of these story-based, sometimes cozy, sometimes not, games that are considered to be some very niche indie games, taking some story risks and has some very interesting ways in which they tie the visuals to the narrative. Is it games like Solar Ash, What Remains of Edith Finch, Neon White, Cocoon, one of my favorite games of all time, and Stray, among other things. Mixtape. But here's something really interesting about all of those games. Most of those games do have gameplay. They are telling a story through the game itself. Some of those are sort of traditional cutscenes. Some of those are things that sort of extrapolate as you play the game. But they do have traditional gameplay. Stray, third-person platformer, Artful Escape, you know, some kind of 2D platformer. But then we have Mixtape. And Mixtape comes to us from a Australian indie studio, and I use indie in air quotes, and we'll get back to that in a second. Indie studio called Beethoven and Dinosaur, and the team that actually worked on Mixtape, through all indications, seems to be about 12 or 13 people. That is the core team. That's not counting subcontractors or anything like that. As we have learned from games like Expedition 33, sometimes there are people working sort of behind the scenes that are not part of the core team, that is not part of those numbers. Okay, so it comes to us from game director Johnny Galvatron, who has a really interesting moniker named after a certain fictional character.
Will anyone else attempt to fill his shoes?
What did he say his name was?
Galvatron.
So when I was a kid, I was completely obsessed with the 1987 animated Transformers movie. This was such a snapshot of my childhood as when I was a kid. Back in the day, before Amazon was Amazon, there used to be this company called CD Now. And I bought the soundtrack CD off of there. But I was obsessed with this movie. Just completely obsessed. I used a camcorder to make like a bootleg version of this when it came out on VHS. And this is kind of back in the day when they didn't really release movies, or some movies didn't get released for home purchase. You could only rent them, and to actually buy them was really, really expensive back in those days. And I made a bootleg version of this. Every single time this movie would come out on like Blu-ray or DVD, I would buy like a new copy. I think I actually have 3 versions of this. And playing through Mixtape, I already knew that the director was a fan of Transformers, the animated movie, because his name is Johnny Galvatron. But then something happened in Mixtape that totally blew me away. Was something that I was not expecting, but I probably should have been expecting, that just warmed my heart as a Gen X kid and as a fan of this movie and music from this era.
No, it's not.
Holy shit! This is The Touch by Stan Bush, originally released in 1986 on the Transformers animated movie soundtrack. It's the cheese, the stuffed crust, the quattro formaggio. But this is my only sporting memory, and it feels totally appropriate.
However, this video isn't really about Mixtape itself. What this is really, really about is the reaction to Mixtape, and the idea that this game somehow willed itself into existence, that it might be an industry plant, that for all intents and purposes, according to the rest of the internet, this game doesn't deserve to exist. We've reached the point where gamers are so obsessed with metrics, review scores, Steam charts, player counts, and corporate validation, and sometimes corporate interference, that people generally don't know how to just enjoy something anymore. And honestly, I just don't see the point. And here's the thing, if Mixtape did not work for you, I think that's totally fine. If you are a person that never really connected with the Life is Strange game or any of these other what you would call walking simulators, I totally understand that. Then I think that these complaints about the game's lack of gameplay are valid. But I also think that it's lunacy to try and compare this game to other AAA perfect 10 games just because of that numeric metric that's hanging over the over our heads. And in a way, it's mocking you. It's goading you. These numbers don't matter. I mean, they matter to publishers, and they matter to shareholders, and they matter to those people. But that number should not matter to you. What would have happened if this game would have come out and it would have been a 6? Okay. People would be dunking on it, calling it a waste of time. Or if it would have gotten a 7, people would have just said, "Oh, it's another 7. Oh, I can't believe this game got a higher score than Mouse PI." But it didn't. The fact is, it got a 10. And that is the part that broke people's brains, because they're so obsessed with that number. They can't let it go. And maybe you could make the argument that because this game got a 10, that this studio is now going to get more funding, or that we're going to be seeing a new crop of these narrative-based titles. But I guarantee you that none of these titles are going to cost $40. Most of them are going to be $20. Annapurna Interactive has some corporate funding. Okay, so Annapurna Interactive, specifically Mixtape, is funded by this corporation that it has ties to the Australian government, and Johnny Galvatron from Australia. So it makes sense. But there have been other games that have been funded by governments and other corporate entities before. Cult of the Lamb, another very beloved indie game, also received a similar treatment. But I found this post from Reddit from 2 years ago. Annapurna is dead. Could mean trouble for Silent Hill Townfall. And basically this thread talks about how there might be abuse allegations going on in the studio, but moreover, it's talking about how as an indie studio, this publisher is having a hard time holding its head above water. And the general sentiment on this thread is that Annapurna makes good games. Annapurna loves good games, or Annapurna has some beloved indie titles that people like because they're weird, because they're out there, because they're like a little bit outside the box. And it's very, very strange to now, because of Mixtape, to go back and have this like revisionist history when it comes to this publisher. Now, that being said, as I said before, if you do not really like Mixtape because of its lack of gameplay, and to be clear, those claims are 100% true. It is what I would definitely call gameplay light. It's very story focused. In fact, you could definitely argue, as I said before, that it's barely a game at all. It has long stretches of gameplay where you are barely moving your character, or in some cases, it's basically like a mini game that you cannot fail. Is drenched in analog nostalgia. Nostalgia is personal. Nostalgia is specifically coded to you. If you're somebody like me who is obsessed with the 1986 Transformers movie, hearing the touch in a video game will make you pop off. And for me, it did. But taking this game and comparing it to, say, Elden Ring is like comparing a Power Wash Simulator to Red Dead Redemption 2. These games are trying to accomplish completely different things. But modern gaming doesn't really allow for discourse anymore. Everything has to be quantified, ranked, measured, turned into a scoreboard. About how I think review scores are fundamentally broken. And honestly, I think the bigger problem is what review culture has done to players themselves. Because now they don't emotionally engage with games anymore. They engage with them competitively. Like every review is a check mark that either validates or threatens their point of view. That they're opinion being called into question is somehow an attack. We have turned art into stock market analysis, Steam charts, Metacritic scores, concurrent player accounts, engagement numbers. And the weirdest part of all is that these metrics, as I said before, don't matter to normal people. They matter to publishers, investors, executives, platform holders. But some gamers have started defending these corporate metrics like they personally own stock in these companies. And you will hear people say things like, oh man, if it's a 10 out of 10, only 1,200 people are playing this game right now. Okay. And if this game is really as mid as you say it is if this game is so horrible, it will lose money and it will die. These studios will close, these publishers will close down a studio at the drop of a hat, okay? And those are big studios with giant corporations behind them. And yeah, you could argue that the driving force behind Annapurna has a lot of money. The founder of Annapurna is essentially a Nepo baby. She is the daughter of the CEO of Oracle, one of the biggest corporations in the entire world. But that doesn't mean that this studio is just made of money. This game is not trying to be the next live service mega platform. It's just trying to tell a story. And I think Mixtape, and by extension the team that made Mixtape, kind of understands how important nostalgia is more than most modern games. These kids listen to this music because they like it, not because Spotify told them to, and not because IGN gave the album a 9.5, not because some YouTuber called it peak. These mixtapes had songs in them that meant something to them. And honestly, I feel like gaming used to feel that way too. We played games because they were fun. And for a lot of you, maybe this game isn't fun. Why I think that nostalgia isn't objective. It's personal. It's emotional. There are a whole group of people that will tell you that the Star Wars prequel trilogy is better than the original trilogy. And it's not because it's really better. It's because they feel like it belongs to them. And Mixtape gets that. The real issue isn't that some people dislike Mixtape. That's fine. You don't have to like every game. The problem is that people had already decided that this game didn't deserve praise or even exist. So when critics scored it highly, the only possible explanation became corruption, conspiracy, bias, industry plans. For an industry that is constantly complaining about all games being the same and every game being a clone of something, this is something new and weird, which totally fits in with Annapurna's previous catalog. However, getting back to the complaints about this game, do I personally think that Mixtape is a 10? No, I don't. Now, you could make the argument that this game should never have been marketed like a game in the first place. Okay, you're probably right, but here's the thing. Mixtape has all of the earmarks of an interactive movie, from its A24 sort of tongue-in-cheek writing to its sort of Wes Anderson movie atmosphere to the coming-of-age sort of narrative that it's based around. It has a lot of the earmarks of, say, an A24 or a similar independent movie. But I actually don't think that it's an interactive movie. I think it's an interactive soundtrack. Obviously, the core driving force of Mixtape is essentially the mixtape. So the music here is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. So if you do not personally vibe with this soundtrack, then you're not going to really enjoy the story that's being told. Without the soundtrack, there's nothing to base the game around. And I think a lot of people are going to vibe with it, but I understand that a lot of people are not going to. At the end of the day, I will just tell you that I don't actually think that Mixtape is a 10. But I actually don't think, on that same token, that it even matters if it's a 10 or not. Release yourself from being dependent on these review scores. How many people will play this game now out of pure morbid curiosity? Or how many people will completely write it off because they believe that a 10 doesn't belong in this genre? And maybe they're right. But I think that we need to form these opinions for ourselves and say to ourselves, hey, this game is here. It's small. It's $20. And yeah, it may have received some corporate funding. It may have been produced by a Nepo baby. But at the end of the day, it's just a soundtrack. It's just a 4-hour game. And I think that we need to choose joy. Allow ourselves to enjoy it or move on from it and let ourselves say that it's not for us and that that's okay.